a new Deus Ex game has been reportedly cancelled amid layoffs at Eidos Montreal. The worst period for game developers in my kind of living memory continues. According to Bloomberg, over 100 developers were laid off. This was also confirmed by Eidos Montreal. A Deus Ex reboot that they were in the process of making has been cancelled. No prizes for guessing who was holding the sword to chop these developers up. It was your enemies and mine at the Embracer Group. Chris, how many times can I throw to you on this podcast and say, can you believe what's happening here?
I think I could take another 6 or 7, and then after that, I'll just be done.
Yeah.
It's just not. I mean, the Deus Ex isn't really a series I've been that interested in. So, but when things like this happen, it's really shit to just say, well, it's not a game I care about, so therefore, but so like loads more people are losing their jobs again.
Yeah.
And it's like, when is this going to stop? But like, you get the feeling now that everyone's jumping on the bandwagon now, because like, well, let's all do our layoffs now, because if we're part of a big enormous sea of layoffs, maybe we won't look as bad. But everyone's coming out of this really badly, and it's just grim. It shows a remarkable lack of a remarkable short-sightedness that clearly a lot of money was invested during COVID, when game like sales and game kind of use rocketed up, clearly because nobody was leaving their house. And then when COVID ended, all the numbers are going back down again, and this is the consequences. Lots of people are losing their jobs, and it's just grim. It's just, I don't know. It's going to get worse before it gets better, because like as we record this, it's the end of January, and as we did a story last week, basically saying already in January alone we're past halfway, half the total number of layoffs in 2023 as a whole. So 2024 is going to be worse, basically.
Yeah, it seems like a really bad kind of reflex from, as you say, how staffed up things got during the pandemic, how much money was flowing during the pandemic. Jade, is there a way to, what is the solution here? I mean, obviously the solution that we would want is executives and C-suite people accept less money, but when that doesn't happen, like, how do we stop this kind of mass exodus from the games industry? Because there's been a lot of conversation about how now, if you've just lost your job in the games industry and you have 10 years experience, there's like no jobs going. So if you're a graduate, like, what are you supposed to do now?
I don't know. Like, my niece is studying game design at the moment, and something they talk to me all the time about is, oh my God, like, what market am I walking into? Is there even a hope for the future of this industry in regards to, like, what will I be working on? Will I just be competing with too much competition? And I think one of the big things with the layoffs we've seen in January, people have said, oh, the COVID bubble's bursting finally. But while I think that plays a part in it, it feels like so much bigger than that. Like, we're seeing all of these acquisitions that happened in the past few years really come to bite, like Embracer and so on, in the arse, to the point where I feel like when like all of these properties were acquired, we were like, finally, we're going to get a new Deus Ex, or we're going to get a better Tomb Raider and so on. And it's becoming abundantly clear that if it doesn't suit their bottom line, then they really don't care. And I don't know, that scares me for the future of the games industry, and how much talent is either being pushed away from video games or simply doesn't have a place where they can belong anymore. And considering that games are making more money than ever and they're more ambitious than ever, it kind of sucks to see the job market be as fraught as it is. And at least right now, it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better.
Yeah, it's tangential, but like when younger writers and stuff like that, or people in uni ask me now, they're like, what's your advice to become a games journalist? Like, don't.
Yeah.
Like,
I was saying that else at the time.
Well, yeah. But it's like, you can write about games freelance and stuff like that. I hate to give him credit, but Sam White has consistently great advice about this. Like, he has written for GQ and all these massive places, and he's not done it full time ever, as far as I'm aware. He's always done it as an aside to something else. But yeah, it's a horrible situation. Not to put that to one side, but obviously the kind of the newsworthy point from the Deus Ex perspective. Those Deus Ex reboots on the 360, I enjoyed them. Like, I thought both of them were pretty decent. Yeah, they were like okay Sims. They were H Bomber guy, Chris Scullion's best friend, H Bomber guy, has an incredibly long video about Human Revolution that you should go and have a watch of. But Jade, it feels like in an industry where the things that are making money are these big IPs, to chuck away 2 years of work on a fairly big IP seems a bit embracer-ish.
Yeah, because it feels like they want to cling onto that nostalgia and this big IP, but maybe they're coming to realize, maybe spending 5+ years on a immersive sim in a relatively niche franchise probably isn't the best move. Because when I think back to Mankind Divided, like, it wasn't as warmly received as Human Revolution was, but those fans of immersive sim still love it. But ultimately, it was like half of a game, and then the franchise was put on ice. And from what I read on this, it was in the works for 2 years and was on track to entering full production. So are they just in a point now where they thought, let's kill it now before we waste any more money and lay these people off or reallocate these resources? Because, I don't know, it's similar to like the games you see Arcane making now. Is it worth doing big budget immersive sims like this when the audience you're appealing to is never going to match like a big live service or anything like that?
Yeah, it's like it's honestly strange, because when I saw that it was like 2 years of work, it still doesn't click in my head that because these games take a decade now, 2 years of work on something is like not a lot. It's like, they've probably got quite a lot of
we made a law bible. It's in a Google Doc somewhere.
We've decided on a subhead for it. Chris, I think when this Embracer saga's all said and done, the trail of bodies from purely games that could have been perspective will be pretty unprecedented. What did you think when you heard this?
It's grim, and it's just, it blows my mind that a company that big, by all accounts, and again, we don't know the ins and outs of how this all can be, but by all accounts, so much of this is the consequence of one deal falling through. And this alleged deal, was it the Saudis or something that they were apparently doing this big deal with? And if you're running your business and hinging so many people's jobs and so many projects on one deal going through, that's an enormous gamble, and that's just an awful way to run a business. But yeah, you're right. It's going to be years and years and years before we get a full idea of all the stuff that's been abandoned as a result of this. The kind of numerous games that could be brilliant with, that could have been great with a bit of extra time. But the problem is, games are becoming so expensive to make. And although it seems like companies like Embracer Group have an endless pit of money, they clearly don't. And you pump so much money into a game, but the more money you pump into a game, the more copies it's got to sell when it comes out. And presumably they've thought, well, we've put so much money into Deus Ex now, that is this game going to shift 5 million copies or 10 million copies or something that enough to make it be considered a big success? And there's just very few franchises these days that can do that. So the costs need to come down, which is difficult to do in an industry where the players constantly demand more detail and bigger games and stuff like that. The budgets have to go up, but there has to be a point where it hits a peak and the budgets start coming down again, because it's not workable just now. As it is just now, like games, your game has to be a massive blockbuster success, otherwise, like it's a disaster. It can't be one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, you hear the stories of when those Tomb Raider games would come out and do well by any estimation, and then Square were like, disaster, absolute flop.
It sold 9 million copies, sod it, mate. Behind the shed, like, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, no streams. Games can only sell like Spider-Man numbers or nothing. There is nothing else.
And even Spidey was like cutting the line on breaking even. Like, if you look at some of that Insomniac stuff.
Yeah, that's the amount of money spent on that game seems like
ridiculous.
embezzlement. Anyway.